Under the scorching Egyptian sun, the slave auction proceeded as it had for centuries. Noblemen fanned themselves lazily while examining human merchandise with calculating eyes. In the corner stood Amenhotep, a slave whose calloused hands and scarred back told stories of a lifetime in servitude. But today was different. For the first time in 20 years, he had been granted permission to make a purchase with his meager savings, while others eyed practical tools or small livestock. Amenhotep's gaze remained fixed on what everyone else avoided, a massive desert hound with amber eyes that seemed to burn with ancient wisdom. The beast stood taller than any dog in Memphis, its midnight coat shimmering despite layers of dust and neglect. When Amenhotep's turn came, gasps rippled through the crowd as he pointed not to useful tools, but to the fearsome creature no one dared approach. Laughter echoed through the marketplace as Amenhotep led his purchase away. The massive hound padded silently beside him, ignoring the jeers and pointed fingers. "Wasted your one chance on a beast that will eat more than you earn," called a merchant, shaking his head. Amenhotep kept his eyes forward, clutching the small copper token that had granted him this rare privilege. 20 years of extra work, saving every grain he could barter, led to this moment. Not to tools or a goat that might improve his standing, but to this creature whose eyes had called to something deep within him. Back at his master's estate, Amenhotep led the dog to his humble quarters, a small mud brick room he shared with 3 other slaves. His bunkmates stopped their evening meal, mouths agape. "By the gods," Amenhotep whispered Kamsit, the eldest, "what have you brought among us?" "His name is Anubis," Amenhotep replied, the name coming to him unbidden. "You named a dog after the god of death." Kamsit paled. "You invite misfortune." Amenhotep shrugged and offered the beast water in his only clay bowl. The dog, Anubis, studied him with those penetrating amber eyes before delicately lapping at the water. That night the others refused to sleep near the massive hound. Amenhotep made a pallet in the corner, patting the ground beside him. To everyone's surprise, Anubis circled 3 times and settled beside his new master, resting his massive head on Amenhotep's chest. Morning brought new challenges. Master Senefer, upon seeing the beast, was furious. "You bring this monster into my household. It will consume resources and contribute nothing." "He will hunt, master." Amenhotep kept his eyes downcast. "And guard your property." 1 week, Senefer spat. "Prove its worth, or I sell it for meat." That day in the fields, Anubis followed Amenhotep like a shadow. The overseer, Panhasi, a cruel man who enjoyed wielding his whip, approached with a sneer. "Your worthless pet blocks my path, slave." Before Panhasi could strike, Anubis's demeanor changed. His hackles rose, and a low growl emanated from deep in his chest. The sound froze every worker within earshot. Panhasi's face drained of color as he took a step back. "Control your beast," he stammered, hand hovering over his whip. "Anubis, peace," Amenhotep whispered, placing a hand on the dog's massive shoulder. Instantly the growling ceased, but those amber eyes remained fixed on the overseer. Panhasi retreated, maintaining his dignity with difficulty. "Keep it away from me, slave." By evening, whispers spread through the slave quarters. Kamsit watched the dog with newfound respect. The way he stared down Panhasi, "I've never seen the man retreat from anything." Amenhotep nodded, running his hand through Anubis's thick fur. "He understands more than a dog should." "To demonstrate," he whispered, "Anubis, bring my water bowl." The massive hound rose, padded to the corner where Amenhotep's few possessions lay, and delicately picked up the clay bowl in his jaws. He returned it without a drop spilled. Kamsit's eyes widened. No ordinary dog learns commands so quickly. That night, Amenhotep shared his meager ration with Anubis, who accepted the food with dignity rather than the ravening hunger one might expect. As darkness fell, the dog positioned himself at the entrance to their quarters, amber eyes gleaming in the moonlight. "He guards us," whispered Neko, the youngest of Amenhotep's bunkmates. Perhaps your choice wasn't so foolish, Camoset conceded. Amenhotep smiled, watching as his new companions surveyed their humble domain like a sentinel. Something about the dog's bearing reminded him of the carved statues in the temple. Regal, vigilant, timeless. He couldn't explain the connection he felt, only that when those amber eyes met his, he sensed something beyond ordinary understanding passing between them. In the days that followed, Anubis proved his worth. He retrieved tools, carried water, and even helped drag harvested crops. Master Senefer grudgingly allowed the arrangement to continue, especially after Anubis caught a thief attempting to steal from the grain storage. The other slaves began treating Amenhotep differently. The man who had always been quiet, obedient, invisible, was now noticed, approached for favors. Ask your Anubis to watch my children while I work the night shift. Can your hound help find my missing amulet? Each night, under star-filled skies, Amenhotep trained Anubis in the secluded corner of the estate gardens. The dog learned commands faster than seemed possible, sometimes anticipating Amenhotep's wishes before he voiced them. "You are no ordinary creature," Amenhotep whispered one night, stroking the massive head resting in his lap. "What secrets do you hold, my friend?" Anubis blinked slowly, those amber eyes reflecting the moonlight, seeming to hold answers to questions Amenhotep hadn't yet learned to ask. A full moon illuminated the small courtyard where Amenhotep had gained permission to bathe Anubis. The dog's coat, matted with weeks of dust and grime, had begun to smell, drawing complaints from the overseer. "Stand still," Amenhotep murmured as he poured water over the massive beast. Anubis remained perfectly motionless, those amber eyes watching Amenhotep with what seemed like amusement. As Amenhotep worked the wet fur with his hands, he felt something hard beneath the matted hair around the dog's neck. Curious, he parted the thick coat to reveal a collar hidden beneath layers of dirt and fur. "What's this?" he whispered, fingers tracing the metal band. The collar was unlike anything he had seen, crafted of a strange metal that gleamed gold but felt lighter, inlaid with lapis lazuli and carnelian stones. Most striking were the hieroglyphs etched into its surface, symbols Amenhotep couldn't read, but recognized as sacred writing. "This is no ordinary collar," he breathed, examining the royal cartouches and temple markings. As the water revealed more of Anubis's coat, Amenhotep noticed unusual markings, patterns, in the black fur that seemed almost deliberate, swirls and lines like the sacred tattoos priests wore. Later that night he sought out Makatur, the eldest slave in the household, a man who had once served in a temple before being captured in war. "What do you make of this?" Amenhotep asked, showing him a small fragment of the collar's design he had scratched onto a pottery shard. Makatur's rheumy eyes widened. "Where did you see this?" "On Anubis's collar." The old man glanced nervously at the massive dog resting in the corner. "These are royal symbols, specifically from the temple of Anubis at Sinopolis. Sacred guardians wear such markings." "Temple guardians? You mean priests?" "No," Makatur whispered. "The sacred hounds. Legend says the temple of Anubis keeps special bloodlines of dogs, descendants of the god's own companions. They guard the boundary between this world and the next." He handed back the shard. "If your dog wears this collar, he is no ordinary stray. He belongs to the god." That night, Amenhotep dreamed of towering temple pylons and endless desert sands. In his dream, he walked alongside Anubis, down dark corridors lined with jackal-headed statues, their eyes following his passage. He awoke with a gasp, finding Anubis staring at him intently, as if sharing the same vision. "What are you?" Amenhotep whispered. "And why did you choose me?" The dog tilted his head, those amber eyes reflecting flickering lamplight. Throughout the following days, Amenhotep noticed changes. Anubis seemed to grow more regal, his movements more deliberate now that his true nature was being revealed. The household began to notice as well. Master Senefer summoned Amenhotep to the main house, an unusual occurrence that set the other slaves whispering. "Your beast has caught my wife's attention," Senefer said, reclining on a cushioned chair in the reception hall. "She says it moves like a creature of noble breeding, not some desert mongrel." Amenhotep kept his eyes lowered. "He is special, master." "Indeed. My steward tells me you've discovered a collar of unusual design." Amenhotep's heart raced. How had the steward learned this? "Yes, master. Hidden beneath his coat." "Let me see it." Amenhotep hesitated, then carefully removed the collar from a fold in his simple kilt. Senefer leaned forward, eyes widening at the gleaming metal and precious stones. "By the gods," he breathed. "These are temple markings. Royal ones." He looked at Amenhotep with new eyes. "How did a temple guardian come to be sold at a common market?" "I do not know, master." Senefer handed back the collar with unexpected care. "Replace it on the dog, and speak of this to no one else. There may be complications if certain people learn what you possess." That evening, as Amenhotep replaced the collar around Anubis's neck, the dog seemed to stand taller, as if reclaiming part of his identity. The other slaves noticed the change immediately. "His eyes," whispered Nakau. "They glow like amber in sunlight." Kamwasit kept his distance. "There is power there, old power." That night, Amenhotep's dreams grew more vivid. He saw himself as a child, before slavery had claimed him, running through a village by a river. He saw his mother's face, nearly forgotten after 20 years, and felt the weight of something important he needed to remember. In the dream, a jackal-headed figure watched from the shadows, waiting for recognition. Amenhotep awoke to find Anubis standing over him, paws on his chest, those intelligent eyes boring into his, as if trying to communicate something of vital importance. Outside, the first light of dawn broke over the eastern horizon. "What are you trying to tell me?" Amenhotep whispered. The dog stepped back, allowing him to rise, then padded to the doorway and looked back expectantly. Something was changing. The connection between them deepened. Somewhere in a temple dedicated to the god of death and rebirth, someone was beginning to notice the absence of a sacred guardian. The grain storage stood silent in the pre-dawn light as Amenhotep completed his inventory count. Master Senefer had assigned him this additional duty, a small acknowledgement of his growing reliability. Anubis sat at attention nearby, amber eyes scanning the shadows. "Finished," Amenhotep murmured, marking the final tally on a clay tablet. "Come, Anubis, we can rest before fieldwork begins." As they turned to leave, a commotion erupted from the main house. Shouts and running feet echoed across the courtyard. Amenhotep hesitated, then moved toward the disturbance, Anubis padding silently beside him. Master Senefer stood in the courtyard, face contorted with rage, as slaves and servants gathered nervously. "Theft! From my own table!" Senefer bellowed. "Someone has stolen bread prepared for my morning meal." The household steward, Panahesi, stepped forward. "Master, I saw a slave near the kitchen at dawn." Senefer's eyes narrowed. "Who?" "The one with the dog," Panahesi replied, pointing directly at Amenhotep. Silence fell as all eyes turned toward him. Amenhotep felt his blood run cold. "I have been at the grain storage since before dawn," he said, fighting to keep his voice steady. "Completing the inventory as ordered." "Convenient," Panahesi sneered. "No witnesses." Senefer studied Amenhotep, then gestured to the guards. "Search his quarters and his person." Rough hands pushed Amenhotep against a wall, searching his simple garments. Anubis growled low, but Amenhotep whispered, "Stay, peace." The massive dog obeyed, though his eyes never left the guards. "Nothing, master," reported the guard after the search. "His quarters," Senefer ordered. Amenhotep was marched to the slave quarters, heart pounding. False accusations against slaves often ended in brutal punishment, regardless of evidence. Many masters believed that pain was the surest path to truth. As the guards tore through his few possessions, Anubis suddenly stiffened. His ears pricked forward, nose testing the air. Without warning, he bolted from the room. "Anubis," Amenhotep called, alarmed. The guards seized him. "Your beast flees. Guilt is clear." Dragged back to the courtyard, Amenhotep found Senefer waiting, whip in hand. The punishment for stealing from the master's table could be death, but more likely would be a beating that left him crippled. "I did not take the bread, master," Amenhotep said, meeting Senefer's eyes directly, a slave's rare defiance born of desperate truth. Before Senefer could respond, commotion erupted again, barking, shouting, then a scream moments later. Anubis appeared, dragging something across the courtyard. Panahesi, the steward, his fine kilt gripped firmly in the dog's massive jaws. "Release me. Call off this demon," Panahesi shrieked, his dignity forgotten as he scrambled to free himself. Anubis dragged him directly to Senefer's feet, then released him and moved with purpose toward a large decorative pot. The dog's paw knocked it over, spilling out several loaves of bread, wrapped in linen. The courtyard fell silent. "What is this?" Senefer asked, voice dangerously soft. Panahesi's face drained of color. I don't know how those got there." Anubis returned to Panahesi, nudging aside his cloak to reveal crumbs in the folds of his clothing. The dog sat back, amber eyes fixed on the steward with an almost human accusation. "The dog," one servant whispered. "It knew." Senefer's expression shifted from rage to cold calculation. "It seems, Panahesi, that you sought to divert attention from your own theft by accusing another." "Master, no. This slave has trained his beast to frame me. Enough." Senefer's voice cut like a knife. "Guards, hold him." As Panahesi was restrained, Senefer turned to Amenhotep. "Your dog has unusual skills." Amenhotep bowed his head. "He sees truth, master." That evening, Amenhotep found himself moved to new quarters, a small room attached to the grain storage he now officially supervised. Anubis lay beside him on a reed mat, unusually attentive. "You saved me today," Amenhotep whispered, stroking the massive head. "How did you know?" Anubis blinked slowly, those amber eyes reflecting the oil lamp's flame. Word spread quickly through the estate. By morning, 3 slaves waited outside Amenhotep's new quarters. "My amulet is missing," said the first, an elderly woman. "Can your Anubis find it?" "My child is sick," said another. "The physicians say a curse. Can your dog see what others cannot?" The third simply held out a broken pot. "This was my mother's. I'm accused of breaking it, but it was not me." Amenhotep looked from them to Anubis, who sat watching, head tilted as if considering their requests. "I cannot promise anything," Amenhotep said carefully, "but we will try." That day marked the beginning of change. As Amenhotep performed his regular duties, slaves and even house servants would approach with whispered requests. Anubis would listen, head tilted, then sometimes follow a scent or lead Amenhotep to unlikely places where missing items were recovered. Master Senefer observed this growing influence with calculation rather than anger. A slave who could maintain order among others had value. "Your position improves," Khemaset noted when they met at the evening meal. "But be cautious. Panahesi has powerful friends, and many find it unnatural. How your dog seems to know things no animal should." Amenhotep nodded, watching Anubis, who sat alertly at the edge of the firelight. "Sometimes I wonder if I chose him, or if he chose me." "Perhaps," Khemaset said softly. "Neither choice was accident, but destiny." The estate hummed with frantic activity. Servants polished bronze fixtures until they gleamed like gold. Slaves swept courtyards clean of every grain of sand. Gardens were trimmed, ponds cleared of debris, and incense burners positioned at strategic corners to mask any lingering odors. "What causes such commotion?" Amenhotep asked, as he completed his morning grain inventory. 2 months had passed since the bread incident, and his position had stabilized into something approaching respect. Nikao, now assigned as his assistant, looked up from tallying clay pots. A royal messenger arrived at dawn. Someone important visits tomorrow, a dignitary from the Temple of Pharaoh. Amenhotep nodded, continuing his work while Anubis lounged in the shade, watchful as always. The dog had grown even more impressive over the past weeks. His midnight coat now gleamed with health, the hidden markings more visible. The collar, which Amenhotep kept polished, caught sunlight in mesmerizing patterns. That evening, Master Senefer summoned Amenhotep to the main house. "Your quarters and the storage facilities must be immaculate," Senefer instructed, pacing nervously. "The visitor wishes to see all aspects of my estate, including grain management." "Yes, Master. May I ask who visits?" Senefer's expression shifted between pride and anxiety. Meriteten, high priest of the Temple of Anubis. A man with the pharaoh's ear. Amenhotep felt a chill along his spine. The Temple of Anubis, just as Meketeri had identified from the collar's markings. "The Temple of Anubis," he repeated carefully. Senefer narrowed his eyes. "Yes, does this concern you?" "No, Master." Amenhotep kept his face neutral. "All will be prepared." Through the night, Amenhotep cleaned his quarters meticulously. Anubis watched with what seemed like amusement, those amber eyes following his frantic movements. "This cannot be coincidence," Amenhotep whispered to the dog. "A high priest from your temple, coming here? Does he search for you?" Anubis tilted his head, ears forward in that expression of intense listening that made him seem almost human in his comprehension. Dawn broke with unusual clarity, the morning air crisp and still. The entire household assembled in the main courtyard, arranged by rank. As grain supervisor, Amenhotep stood with the skilled workers, Anubis sitting regally beside him. He had debated whether to hide the dog, but something told him concealment would be futile. The procession arrived with the pageantry expected of religious royalty. Heralds announced the visitor. Servants carried a gilded sedan chair. Guards in ceremonial dress flanked the entourage, their polished spears catching sunlight. From the sedan chair emerged a tall figure in pristine white linen, his shaved head gleaming with scented oils. Gold and lapis jewelry adorned his neck and wrists. His eyes, lined with kohl, surveyed the assembly with practiced indifference. "High Priest Meriteten," announced the herald, "sacred vessel of Anubis, guardian of the Western Gate, keeper of the divine hounds." Master Senefer stepped forward, bowing deeply. "Great One, my humble estate welcomes you. All that I possess is at your disposal." The formalities proceeded as expected. Meriteten inspected the house, gardens and fields with the casual interest of one accustomed to far grander sights, until the tour reached the grain storage. Amenhotep stood at attention beside the freshly swept entrance, Anubis sitting perfectly still at his side. As the procession approached, he bowed deeply, eyes downcast as protocol demanded. The sharp intake of breath was audible in the sudden silence. "Stop," commanded a voice rich with authority. Amenhotep remained bowed, heart pounding. "Look at me, slave," the priest ordered. Slowly, Amenhotep raised his eyes. Meriteten stood frozen, his gaze not on him, but fixed on Anubis. The priest's face had drained of color. "Impossible," Meriteten whispered. With ceremonial slowness, the high priest sank to one knee before the massive dog. The assembled household gasped at the sight of such dignity kneeling before a slave's pet. "Kensu," Meriteten breathed the name like a prayer, "guardian of the inner sanctuary, how came you to this place?" Anubis, or Kensu, remained seated, those amber eyes regarding the priest with what Amenhotep could only describe as royal indifference. Meriteten reached out a trembling hand toward the collar, then looked up at Amenhotep with a mixture of awe and suspicion. "You," he said, rising. How did a slave come to possess the sacred guardian of the temple of Anubis? Every eye turned to Amenhotep. Master Senefer's expression darkened with concern and confusion. I purchased him at auction, Great One, Amenhotep answered, truthfully. 2 months ago, he was presented as an ordinary, if unusually large hound. Purchased. Impossible. This is Khenshu, bred from 30 generations of sacred guardians. His bloodline is more carefully documented than most royal houses. Merititan circled the dog, examining him from every angle. He disappeared from the temple sanctuary 3 months ago. The entire priesthood has been searching. Amenhotep swallowed hard. I did not steal him, Great One. I swear by all gods. No, Merititan said thoughtfully. You could not have. The temple sanctum is guarded by spells and sentinels. No ordinary man could enter, much less remove a guardian. He studied Amenhotep with new intensity, which raises a far more troubling question. Why would a temple guardian choose to follow a slave? Master Senefer stepped forward, sensing danger to his household. Perhaps there is a simple explanation. There is nothing simple here, Merititan interrupted. He turned to his attendants. Change of plans. We remain here tonight. To Senefer, he added, and this slave and the hound will return with me to the temple tomorrow. Dawn painted the eastern sky copper as Amenhotep gathered his few possessions, a spare linen kilt, a small wooden comb, and the clay bowl he had first offered to Anubis. 20 years of servitude distilled into 3 simple objects. The priest awaits, announced a temple guard, his expression neutral but watchful. Amenhotep nodded, tucking his belongings into a small cloth. He looked around the room that had briefly been his, the first private space he'd known since childhood. Part of him wanted to resist, to cling to this small security. But Anubis Khenshu stood alert by the door, amber eyes expectant. In the main courtyard, High Priest Merititan conferred with Master Senefer. Gold changed hands, compensation for the loss of a valuable slave. Approach, Merititan commanded, when he spotted Amenhotep. Amenhotep obeyed, keeping his eyes lowered as befitted his station. Khenshu padded silently beside him. Your master has been compensated for your services, Merititan said. You now belong to the temple of Anubis. He held out a rolled papyrus. This documents the transfer and grants us safe passage to Sinopolis. Amenhotep accepted the scroll, careful not to touch the priest's fingers. The papyrus felt unexpectedly heavy, laden with official seals and hieroglyphs that would determine his fate. Thank you, Great One, he murmured, though gratitude was far from what he felt. One master exchanged for another, perhaps a harsher one. Camuset appeared from the gathered household, pressing something into Amenhotep's hand. A small protective amulet carved from bone. May Anubis guard your journey, the old slave whispered, glancing meaningfully at the dog. The procession departed with far less ceremony than it had arrived. Amenhotep walked behind the priest's sedan chair, Khenshu at his side. 4 guards flanked them, their expressions making it clear that while Amenhotep wasn't bound, he wasn't free to flee either. Beyond the estate walls, Amenhotep faltered momentarily. How long since he had walked on a public road? 15 years? 20? The world beyond the estate was at once familiar and terrifyingly new. Memphis sprawled before them, one of Egypt's great cities. The streets teemed with life. Merchants haggling, children playing, craftsmen working in open-air shops. Amenhotep stared in wonder at the vibrant scene, drinking in colors and sounds long forgotten. People stepped aside for the priest's procession, bowing respectfully. Many eyes widened at the sight of Khenshu, his massive form and regal bearing unlike ordinary dogs. Children pointed and whispered. The sacred guardian returns, someone murmured. But who is the slave? Another voice wondered. By midday, they reached the city's edge. The priest emerged from his sedan chair, stretched. We rest here, Merititan announced, gesturing to a roadside pavilion reserved for travelers of importance. The journey to Sinopolis takes 3 days. Servants bustled about, preparing a meal. Amenhotep stood awkwardly, uncertain of his place. A guard directed him to a spot in the shade, at a respectful distance from the priest. "Water for the guardian," Meritane instructed, pointing at Khonsu. Amenhotep filled his clay bowl from an offered water jug. As Khonsu drank, Meritane approached, studying them both. 20 years a slave, your master said," the priest remarked, his tone conversational but probing. "Yet you carry yourself differently than most slaves. There is dignity." Amenhotep kept his eyes lowered. "I try to honor the gods through my conduct, Great One. And before your enslavement, your speech marks you as educated." Memories flickered. A riverside village, a father who served as a scribe to local officials. Lessons in reading and writing cut short by raiders who left the village in flames. "My father was a village scribe," Amenhotep answered carefully. "I learned some things before raiders came." Meritane nodded thoughtfully. "Yet of all men, Khonsu chose you." His coal-lined eyes narrowed. "The guardians of Anubis are not ordinary creatures. They see what remains hidden. They judge the weight of soul." The priest's gaze shifted to the dog, who had finished drinking and now sat watching them, alert and regal. "In 3 centuries of temple records, no guardian has ever voluntarily left the sanctuary," Meritane continued. "Yet Khonsu disappeared without explanation, only to surface at a common market where he chose a slave as his companion." He gestured to the road ahead. "I begin to believe this journey was ordained by Anubis himself." That night, they camped beneath star-filled sky. For the first time in decades, Amenhotep slept under the open heavens, with no walls to contain him. The vastness both terrified and exhilarated him. In whispered tones, he confided to Khonsu, "I could run into the desert, into freedom." The massive dog raised his head, those amber eyes reflecting starlight. "But where would I go?" Amenhotep continued, stroking the thick fur. "And would you come with me?" Khonsu rested his heavy head on Amenhotep's chest, a comforting weight that somehow conveyed certainty. Whatever destiny awaited, they would face it together. In his dreams that night, Amenhotep again walked through towering temple corridors. But this time, the jackal-headed statues bowed as he passed, as if greeting a long-awaited arrival. The temple of Anubis rose from the desert like a mirage, its towering pylons silhouetted against the setting sun. After 3 days of travel, the sight struck Amenhotep with unexpected familiarity, as if he had seen this place before, beyond his dream. "The Western Sanctuary," Meritane announced, "where Anubis guides souls to judgment." The procession approached along the sacred avenue, flanked by jackal-headed sphinxes. Khonsu walked with heightened alertness, his massive head held high, amber eyes fixed on the temple entrance. Priests emerged to greet them, their shaved heads and white linen robes nearly identical to Meritane's, though less elaborately adorned. "The guardian returns," Meritane announced. Whispers erupted among the assembled priests. Many fell to their knees as Khonsu passed, touching their foreheads to the ground. Others stared at Amenhotep with undisguised suspicion. "And the slave?" asked an elderly priest, his wizened face creased with concern. "Comes with him," Meritane replied simply, "by the guardian's choice." Inside, the temple opened into a vast hypostyle hall, its ceiling supported by massive columns carved to resemble bundled papyrus. Painted scenes covered every surface, Anubis weighing hearts against the feather of Maat, guiding worthy souls, condemning the unworthy to the crocodile-headed Ammit. Amenhotep fought to maintain composure. The dreams that had haunted him since meeting Khonsu now materialized before his eyes. The same columns, the same painted scenes, the same feeling of ancient power. They proceeded deeper into the temple, through increasingly restricted chambers. Priests parted before them, many touching amulets in protective gestures, as Amenhotep passed. Finally they reached a secluded courtyard open to the sky, where a pool of dark water reflected the emerging stars. "The inner sanctuary," Meritane explained. Only guardians and chosen priests may enter. Yet they continued, descending stone steps to a chamber illuminated by oil lamps. The walls here held no decorative scenes, only row upon row of hieroglyphic text, meticulously carved and painted. In the center stood a raised dais supporting a massive stone tablet, its surface covered in hieroglyphs more ancient than those on the walls. Beside it lay several thick cushions, dog beds. Amenhotep realized. Khenshu moved directly to one cushion, turning 3 circles before settling with a contented sigh. The action, so ordinary after the temple's solemnity, almost made Amenhotep smile. "The records chamber," Meritaten said, his voice hushed with reverence. "Here we keep the lineage of the guardians and the prophecies pertaining to them." The high priest approached the stone tablet, running reverent fingers over its inscriptions. 30 generations of sacred guardians, bred from Anubis's own companion, their bloodlines, their deeds, their chosen priests. His gaze shifted to Amenhotep. "Never in our records has a guardian chosen someone not of the priesthood. Never has one left the temple voluntarily." "Perhaps I should leave," Amenhotep suggested, uncomfortable under the scrutiny of the priests who had followed them. "No," Meritaten replied sharply. "Khenshu chose you. We must understand why." An elderly priest hobbled forward, his eyes milky with cataracts. "The prophecy," he wheezed. "Remember the prophecy." Meritaten's expression shifted. "Bring lamps closer," he commanded. Servants raised their oil lamps, illuminating the lower portion of the stone tablet. Meritaten knelt, studying the inscriptions intently. "When darkness threatens the 2 lands," he translated aloud, "the guardian shall seek the one whose heart balances perfectly against Maat's feather. Not priest, but pure of spirit, not noble, but noble of deed. Together they shall walk between worlds to preserve the balance." The chamber fell silent. "It was believed to refer to the final days," Meritaten continued softly, "when Apophis threatens to devour the sun forever." The elderly priest clutched Meritaten's arm. "And if those days are upon us?" Another priest, younger and more skeptical, stepped forward. "How can we know this slave is the one spoken of in prophecy? He could be a thief who somehow lured the guardian away." "Khenshu cannot be lured or tricked," Meritaten replied. "The guardians see the truth of all souls." He turned to Amenhotep. "There is a way to be certain." Amenhotep swallowed nervously. "How?" "The guardian can show us." Meritaten approached Khenshu, kneeling before the massive dog. "Great One, show us the truth of this man you have chosen." Khenshu rose from his cushion, stretching leisurely before padding to Amenhotep. The dog sat before him, amber eyes staring intently into his. Amenhotep felt a strange sensation, as if the room were fading around him. Khenshu's eyes seemed to grow, becoming twin suns that consumed his vision. He felt himself falling forward, into those eyes, into memories not his own. He saw the temple through Khenshu's eyes, priests coming and going, rituals performed, nights spent guarding the boundary between life and death. He felt the dog's growing restlessness, a compulsion pulling him from the temple, guiding him to the city, to the market, to Amenhotep. And then, most shockingly, he saw himself through Khenshu's eyes. Not the exterior shell of a weathered slave, but his soul glowing with a light that balanced perfectly against some cosmic scale. The vision ended abruptly. Amenhotep found himself on his knees, trembling. Around him the priests stood in stunned silence. "What did you see?" Meritaten whispered. "Everything," Amenhotep replied. "He has been searching for me. I don't understand why, but he sees something in me that I cannot see in myself." Meritaten exchanged glances with the elder priests. "Then the prophecy awakens. And you, Amenhotep, former slave, have a new purpose in the service of Anubis." Dawn arrived with the sonorous toll of copper gongs. Amenhotep woke disoriented, momentarily forgetting his new surroundings, a small chamber adjacent to the inner sanctuary, where Khenshu had insisted he sleep rather than in the servants' quarters. You still snore like a hippopotamus, he murmured to the massive dog, stretched beside his pallet. Kensu's ear twitched in what seemed like indignation. A novice priest appeared at the doorway, his freshly shaved head gleaming. The high priest summons you to the training yard. The young man's eyes darted nervously between Amenhotep and Kensu, awe and suspicion battling in his expression. The training yard proved to be a secluded courtyard enclosed by high walls. Sand covered the ground, raked into perfect smoothness. Various implements hung on the walls, staffs, ceremonial daggers, incense burners, and tools Amenhotep couldn't identify. Meritaten waited, accompanied by two elder priests. All three wore simple kilts rather than their formal robes. You begin your instruction today, Meritaten announced without preamble. The Guardian has chosen you, but you remain untrained, unlearned in our ways. Amenhotep bowed his head. I will learn what I must, Great One. You will address me as teacher during training. Meritaten corrected. Here we observe different protocols. He gestured to a wooden chest. Your training garments and tools. Inside the chest, Amenhotep found a white linen kilt, finer than any clothing he had worn in decades, and a bronze dagger in a leather sheath. The dagger's handle was carved in the shape of a jackal's head, its eyes inlaid with amber stones reminiscent of Kensu's gaze. The ceremonial blade of a guardian's companion, Meritaten explained. Not for drawing blood, but for severing connections between worlds when necessary. Training began immediately. First came purification, washing with natron, reciting prayers to Anubis. Then basic movements, ritual gestures, and sacred postures. Amenhotep's body, hardened by years of labor, adapted quickly to the physical demands. His mind, however, struggled with the complex recitations. Again, Meritaten insisted, after Amenhotep stumbled over a prayer sequence. The words must be precise. They form bridges between realms. By midday, Amenhotep's voice was hoarse, his mind swimming with unfamiliar terms and concepts. Throughout the training, Kensu watched from the shade, those amber eyes missing nothing. The Guardian will guide you, Meritaten said, noting Amenhotep's frequent glances toward the dog. But you must master the fundamentals yourself. What exactly is my role to be? Amenhotep ventured to ask during a brief rest. Guardian's companion, Meritaten replied. A sacred office, though long vacant. The Guardians usually work with priests, but the prophecy speaks of one who is not priest-born. He studied Amenhotep thoughtfully. In ancient times, before temples were built of stone, companions walked with guardians between villages, guiding the dead and protecting the living from dark forces. The afternoon brought new challenges. Amenhotep learned the proper methods for handling sacred objects, the correct approach to the sanctuary altars, and the specific commands for directing Kensu during rituals. Kesetba Meritaten demonstrated, combining a hand gesture with the command. It directs the Guardian to reveal hidden spirits. When Amenhotep repeated the command, Kensu immediately responded, his posture shifting to alert watchfulness, eyes scanning the courtyard, as if seeing things invisible to human perception. Remarkable, murmured one of the elder priests. The Guardian responds to him as to one temple trained from birth. Not all in the temple were impressed, however. As training concluded for the day, Amenhotep became aware of whispers and hostile glances from younger priests, observing from the courtyard's edge. Slave-born usurper, one muttered just loudly enough to be heard. Defiling sacred traditions, added another. That evening, exhausted but strangely exhilarated, Amenhotep sat in his small chamber, studying a papyrus scroll Meritaten had given him. Basic temple hieroglyphs he was expected to memorize by morning. Some believe I don't belong here, he confided to Kensu, who lay alert beside him. Perhaps they're right. Yesterday I was measuring grain. Today I'm learning to guide souls to the afterlife. Kensu's amber eyes fixed on him with that unnervingly intelligent gaze. Yes, I know you chose me. Amenhotep sighed. But why? A soft knock interrupted his musing. The elderly priest with clouded eyes entered, leaning heavily on a wooden staff. "I am Nuktmen," he introduced himself. "I served as companion to Kansu's sire in my youth." The old man settled stiffly onto a stool. "I came to see what the Guardian finds so special in a former slave." Amenhotep tensed. "I did not seek this role. Few who are worthy of power actively seek it," Nuktmen replied cryptically. "May I?" He gestured toward Kansu. At Amenhotep's nod, the elder priest reached out, placing a gnarled hand on Kansu's massive head. The dog permitted the touch, those amber eyes half closing in what seemed like respect. "The Guardians see what remains hidden," Nuktmen murmured. "Past lives, future paths, the weight of Ka and Ba in perfect balance." He withdrew his hand. "You face difficult days ahead, Amenhotep. Many here resent your presence. Some fear what the prophecy's awakening means for Egypt." "What does it mean?" The old priest's milky eyes seemed to look through him rather than at him. "Change, danger, opportunity." He rose with effort. "Learn quickly. Events move faster than we know." After Nuktmen departed, Amenhotep returned to his studies with renewed determination. Whatever destiny had brought him here, whatever purpose Kensu had chosen him for, he would not fail for lack of effort. Outside his window, the stars wheeled overhead, marking the passage of night hours. Tomorrow would bring new lessons, new challenges. But for the first time in decades, Amenhotep felt something he had nearly forgotten: purpose. A month of rigorous training transformed Amenhotep. His posture straightened, his movements became more deliberate, and temple hieroglyphs now made sense where once they had been mysterious scratches. Each dawn began with purification rituals, followed by hours of instruction under Meritaten's exacting guidance. Each evening ended with study by lamplight, Kensu a constant, watchful presence. "Your progress exceeds expectations," Meritaten acknowledged after Amenhotep flawlessly recited a complex invocation. "Though some fundamentals still elude you." The some fundamentals referred to abilities the Guardian companions supposedly developed: seeing the invisible threads connecting the living and dead, sensing disturbances in matter's balance, perceiving the weight of soul. Despite Meritaten's instruction, these mystical senses remained dormant in Amenhotep. This particular evening, Amenhotep retired early, exhausted from a demanding ritual that had required maintaining the same posture for hours. Sleep claimed him instantly, but sometime in the darkest hours, he jerked awake. Kensu stood beside his pallet, hackles raised, a low growl vibrating through the chamber. "What is it?" Amenhotep whispered. Instantly alert, the massive dog turned toward the door, amber eyes gleaming with unusual intensity. Without waiting for Amenhotep, Kensu padded silently into the corridor. Grabbing the ceremonial dagger from beside his pallet, Amenhotep followed. The temple corridors lay silent and dark, illuminated only by occasional oil lamps burning in wall niches. Kensu moved with purpose, leading Amenhotep deeper into the temple complex, toward the most sacred chamber. As they approached the inner sanctuary, Amenhotep heard it: the soft scrape of sandals on stone, the faint clink of metal. Kensu froze, ears forward, then changed direction, circling around through a side passage. Understanding dawned. Someone was in the sanctuary. Who shouldn't? They emerged onto a narrow balcony overlooking the sacred pool. Below, a hooded figure worked at the sanctuary's altar, removing something from its resting place. Kensu growled, the sound echoing in the sacred space. The figure whirled, face hidden in shadow, clutching a glinting object, the sacred amulet of Anubis, used in the most important temple rituals. Without hesitation, the thief fled toward a side exit. Kensu bounded down the stone steps, Amenhotep close behind. The chase led them through labyrinthine corridors, deep into rarely used sections of the temple complex. "Temple guards," Amenhotep shouted, hoping to alert others. His voice echoed uselessly. The thief reached a small courtyard with a well, momentarily trapped as Kensu blocked the only exit. Turning, the figure drew a real dagger, not a ceremonial one, its edge glinting dangerously. "Stay back," warned a voice Amenhotep recognized with shock. "Nefermeno," he questioned, identifying one of the young priests who had most openly resented his presence. "The slave recognizes me," Nefermeno sneered, pulling back his hood. "How unfortunate. Why steal the amulet?" Amenhotep asked, stalling for time, hoping guards would arrive. Why should sacred relics remain hidden when they could bring wealth? Foreign collectors pay fortunes for such items. Nefermeno's handsome face twisted with disdain. "Especially now, with whispers of prophecy and danger. The price doubles with each passing day." Kanso edged closer, teeth bared. "Call off the beast," Nefermeno demanded, brandishing the dagger, "or I'll gut it like a sacrificial bull." Instead of replying, Amenhotep remembered one of the commands he'd been taught. "Satef Ka-O," he intoned, combining the proper hand gesture with the words. Kanso responded instantly. The massive dog seemed to blur, moving with impossible speed. Before Nefermenu could react, Kanso circled behind him, forcing him toward Amenhotep. Trapped between them, Nefermenu slashed wildly with his dagger. "You're nothing but a slave playing at priest," he spat. "You've bewitched them all with this mongrel's trick." Something snapped in Amenhotep, patience worn thin by weeks of similar whispers and sneers. As Nefermenu lunged, Amenhotep sidestepped with the fluid motion Meritaten had drilled into him. Catching the priest's wrist, he twisted sharply, forcing the dagger from his grip. The clatter of approaching guards echoed down the corridor. Desperate, Nefermenu reached into his robes and hurled a handful of powder toward Kansu's face, some noxious substance that made the dog recoil momentarily. In that instant, the priest made a final attempt to flee, shoving Amenhotep aside. But Kansu recovered quickly, lunging with calculated precision to seize the hem of Nefermenu's robe. The fine linen tore, sending the priest stumbling into the arms of arriving temple guards. "What happens here?" demanded the guard captain, securing Nefermenu. "Theft of the sacred amulet," Amenhotep replied, pointing to the gleaming object that had fallen during the struggle. More guards arrived, followed shortly by a hastily robed Meritaten. The high priest surveyed the scene with narrowed eyes. "The guardian alerted you?" he asked Amenhotep. "Yes, teacher. Kensu woke me and led me to the sanctuary." Meritaten's gaze shifted to Nefermenu, who stood defiant despite being restrained. "One of our own. How long has this betrayal festered?" "This slave has corrupted the temple," Nefermenu shouted. "The guardian, the prophecy, all coincidence twisted to elevate a common laborer." "Take him to the holding cells," Meritaten ordered, his voice cold. "We will investigate how deep this corruption runs." As Nefermenu was led away, still hurling accusations, Meritaten turned to Amenhotep. "You used the guardian's commands effectively. The training served its purpose." Amenhotep replied simply, "Indeed." Meritaten studied him with newfound respect. "Perhaps your instincts compensate for what your senses still lack." The guardian chose well. That night, after the temple had settled back into uneasy quiet, Amenhotep sat with Kensu in their chamber, the events replaying in his mind. "There was no coincidence in your alertness," he told the massive dog, stroking the thick fur. "You sensed his intentions before any human could." Kensu's amber eyes reflected the lamplight, holding secrets Amenhotep was only beginning to understand. Nefermenu's betrayal sent ripples through the temple hierarchy. 3 more priests were implicated in the theft ring, all removed from their positions. The temple's routines continued, but with a watchfulness that bordered on paranoia. Guards now stood at sacred chambers day and night. For Amenhotep, the incident brought unexpected validation. Those who had dismissed him as an unworthy interloper now acknowledged, however grudgingly, that he had protected sacred relics when temple-born priests had failed. "The council has reached a decision," Meritaten announced one morning after prayers. "You have advanced sufficiently in basic training, but your spiritual sight remains undeveloped. It is time for the ritual of unveiled eyes. Old Noctmin, standing nearby, inhaled sharply. So soon, most acolytes train for years before. We lack years, Meritaten interrupted. The signs accelerate: thefts of sacred objects, disturbances in the western desert, unusual movement of stars. Whatever approaches, we must be prepared. He fixed Amenhotep with an intense gaze. The ritual begins at sunset. Prepare yourself. Throughout the day, Amenhotep underwent purification ceremonies, ritual bathing, fasting, prayers, and meditation. By late afternoon, his senses already felt heightened, his skin tingling with nervous anticipation. What exactly is this ritual? He asked Noctmin, who had been assigned to guide his preparation. A sacred journey, the elderly priest replied, measuring dried herbs into a ceremonial bowl. Through the boundary between worlds that Anubis guards. The guardian will guide you, but the path is yours alone to walk. His rheumy eyes fixed on Amenhotep. Some never return, others return, changed in ways they never anticipated. As sunset painted the western sky crimson, Amenhotep was led to a chamber deep beneath the temple, a small windowless room with walls of polished black granite. Hieroglyphs covered every surface, their indentations filled with gold leaf that caught the light of oil lamps. In the chamber's center lay a stone platform, shaped like a sarcophagus, but open to the air. Beside it, a brazier waited to be lit. Khenshu was already present, sitting perfectly still beside the platform, those amber eyes more intense than Amenhotep had ever seen them. Disrobe, Meritaten instructed. Lie upon the stone of transition. The stone felt unexpectedly warm against Amenhotep's bare skin. Above him, the ceiling revealed a painted night sky, stars, constellations, and cosmic beings in eternal procession. Priests entered in solemn procession, led by Noctmin, carrying the bowl of herbs. These were placed in the brazier and ignited with a ceremonial flame. Sweet, pungent smoke filled the chamber. Breathe deeply, Meritaten instructed, placing a hand on Amenhotep's forehead. Let your care loosen from your body. The guardian will ensure your safe return. The smoke filled Amenhotep's lungs, at once soothing and disorienting. The hieroglyphs on the walls seemed to move, dancing in the lamplight. Khenshu rose and placed a massive paw directly over Amenhotep's heart. The world dissolved. Amenhotep found himself standing in a vast desert, unlike any he had seen in life. The sand beneath his feet glowed with an inner light. The sky above held no sun, yet everything was perfectly illuminated. Before him stretched a path of silver, winding toward the horizon. Beside him stood Khenshu, somehow both dog and not dog, larger, more imposing, his form occasionally blurring into that of a man with a jackal's head. "Where are we?" Amenhotep asked, his voice echoing strangely. The answer came not in words, but in understanding that bloomed directly in his mind. The space between, the boundary. Anubis's domain. What must I do? Again, understanding rather than words, walk the path. See what has been hidden. Remember what has been forgotten. Together they moved along the silver path. The landscape shifted with each step, desert becoming marsh, marsh becoming field, field becoming forest. Scenes appeared and dissolved around them. Ancient Egypt, in eras long past, rituals performed by priests wearing unfamiliar regalia, guardians like Khenshu, leading souls to judgment. Then, abruptly, Amenhotep saw himself, not as he was now but in another life, wearing the simple white garments of a temple scribe. In the vision he sat beside a guardian hound, recording sacred texts onto papyrus. The scene shifted. Now he wore the headdress of a royal advisor, standing beside Pharaoh's throne while a guardian dog lay at his feet. Again transformation, now a simple village healer, tending wounds while a smaller version of Khenshu kept watch. Life after life unfolded. Different circumstances, different stations, but always the same soul, always the guardian nearby. We have been connected through many lives, Amenhotep whispered in awe. The silver path suddenly darkened ahead. The pleasant scenes vanished, replaced by visions of devastation, villages burning, temples collapsing, dark shapes moving across Egypt's landscape like living shadows. At the heart of the darkness stood a figure, human in form, but somehow wrong, surrounded by writhing shadows. The figure turned, seeming to look directly at Amenhotep across the boundary of vision. It smiled. Amenhotep recoiled, instinctively reaching for Kensu. The not-quite dog growled, the sound vibrating through both realms. The vision collapsed. Amenhotep gasped, finding himself back on the stone platform. Priests gathered anxiously around him. His body felt leaden, drenched in sweat, despite the chamber's coolness. "What did you see?" Meritatan demanded, his composed facade cracking with urgency. "Everything," Amenhotep whispered hoarsely. "Past lives, ancient connections." And he shuddered, remembering the dark figure's smile. "Something coming, something that knows we watch." Meritatan exchanged glances with Nokmin. "The devourer stirs," the old priest murmured. "Can you see them now?" Meritatan asked, gesturing around the chamber. "The threads." Amenhotep blinked, suddenly aware of gossamer strands connecting everything in the room. People, objects, walls, even the air itself. Each priest glowed within a light of varying intensity. Kensu blazed like a bonfire. The world transformed for Amenhotep after the ritual of unveiled eyes. Temple hieroglyphs no longer appeared as mere carvings, but pulsed with living energy. Priests radiated auras of varying brightness. Most startling were the occasional glimpses of spectral figures, the recently deceased, pausing in the temple before their journey to the Western land. "Your sight develops rapidly," Meritatan observed 2 weeks after the ritual, faster than any initiate in temple records. They stood in the sanctuary observing the morning rituals. Amenhotep had graduated from student to assistant, helping perform the sacred ceremonies that maintained Ma'at's balance. "It feels less like learning and more like remembering," Amenhotep admitted, "as if I once knew these things, but forgot." "The past lives you glimpsed," Meritatan nodded. "The Guardian chose you because your soul already carries the necessary patterns. You have walked this path before." Their conversation halted as a temple guard approached. Bowing deeply, "High Priest, royal messengers have arrived. They bear Pharaoh's seal and demand immediate audience." Meritatan's expression remained impassive, but Amenhotep, with his newly awakened sight, perceived the sudden tension in the high priest's aura. "Escort them to the receiving hall." The messengers wore the distinctive garb of the royal court, pleated kilts of fine linen, broad collars of gold and semi-precious stones, and elaborately braided wigs. Their leader carried a cedar box, sealed with Pharaoh's cartouche. "The living god, Pharaoh Amenhotep III, light of the two lands, sends greetings to the temple of Anubis," the messenger intoned formally, bowing to precisely the correct depth for addressing a high priest. "The temple receives Pharaoh's words with reverence," Meritatan replied, completing the ritual exchange. The messenger broke the seal on the cedar box, removing a papyrus scroll similarly sealed. "His Divine Majesty commands the presence of the high priest Meritatan at the royal palace in Thebes without delay." The messenger paused, then added with visible discomfort, "accompanied by the one called Amenhotep, former slave, and the sacred guardian known as Kensu." A murmur rippled through the assembled priests. Pharaoh had specifically named Amenhotep, a virtually unprecedented honor for someone of his former station. "How does His Divine Majesty know of Amenhotep?" Meritatan asked carefully. The messenger's expression revealed nothing. "I convey only Pharaoh's command, not his counsel. A royal barge awaits at the river dock to transport you immediately to Thebes." Preparations happened with dizzying speed. Within an hour, Amenhotep found himself aboard the royal barge, a vessel of such opulence it made Master Senefer's estate seem shabby by comparison. Ebony decks inlaid with ivory, cabins lined with cedar wood, gilded statues of protective deities at bow and stern. How should I behave before Pharaoh? Amenhotep asked Meretat as the vessel glided south toward Thebes. I have no training in court protocol. Keep your eyes lowered, Meretat advised. Speak only when directly addressed. And remember, despite your awakened sight and connection to the Guardian, to the court you remain an oddity, perhaps even a threat to established order. Khenshu lay at Amenhotep's feet, seemingly unperturbed by their sudden journey. Yet Amenhotep sensed the dog's heightened alertness, an anticipation that matched his own anxiety. Why would Pharaoh summon us, he wondered aloud. That, Meretat replied grimly, is what troubles me most. Pharaoh does not concern himself with temple matters unless something threatens the entire kingdom. 3 days later, the royal barge docked at Thebes, Egypt's magnificent capital. Amenhotep stood at the rail, overwhelmed by the city's grandeur. Massive temples and administrative buildings lined the riverfront. Colorful markets teemed with goods from across the known world. Above it all loomed the royal palace, its white walls gleaming in the sunlight. A royal escort awaited them, chariots for the priests, with specially assigned guards for Khenshu. The massive dog endured the attention with regal indifference. Through streets cleared of commoners, they proceeded to the palace complex. Guards in ceremonial dress stood at attention as they passed. Court officials watched with undisguised curiosity, particularly as Khenshu padded beside Amenhotep, the sacred collar gleaming against his dark fur. The throne room exceeded every expectation. Columns soared overhead, painted in vibrant colors and capped with lotus blossom capitals. Walls depicted Pharaoh smiting Egypt's enemies and making offerings to grateful gods. The floor, polished limestone inlaid with colorful stones, reflected movement like water, and upon the golden throne sat Pharaoh Amenhotep III, living embodiment of divine power on earth. His ceremonial beard, the broad collar at his throat, the crook and flail crossed at his chest, all marked him as Egypt's supreme ruler. Despite the elaborate regalia, Amenhotep could see the man was aging, his face lined with the burdens of rule. Following protocol, Meretat prostrated himself completely. Amenhotep did likewise, his forehead touching the cool stone floor. "Rise, priest of Anubis," Pharaoh commanded, his voice surprisingly gentle. "And you, namesake of my royal line, rise and approach with your guardian." Amenhotep obeyed, keeping his eyes respectfully lowered, while using his peripheral vision to avoid stumbling. Khenshu walked perfectly at his side, matching his pace. "So," Pharaoh said when they stood before the throne, "this is the former slave who commands a sacred guardian, the one prophesied to walk between worlds." The ruler's eyes, lined with kohl, studied Amenhotep with surprising intensity. "You are not what I expected. I hope I do not disappoint, Divine One," Amenhotep replied carefully. A smile flickered across Pharaoh's face. "On the contrary, I find unexpected tools often prove most effective." He leaned forward, dropping the formal tone, "And I have need of very effective tools indeed." Connected to Amenhotep by a thick cord of golden light. "Yes," he breathed. "I see everything." Dawn painted the western desert gold as the small expedition departed Thebes. Amenhotep rode a donkey, an uncomfortable experience after years without mounting any animal, while Khenshu trotted effortlessly beside him. Ahead, royal scouts led the way. Behind, a small contingent of temple priests followed, Meretat among them. Pharaoh's instructions had been explicit: investigate disturbing reports from the western oases, where caravans disappeared, and villagers spoke of shadows that moved against the wind. Most alarming were accounts of sacred tomb seals broken, mummies disturbed, violations of the boundary between life and death. "You alone possess both temple authority and the Guardian's power," Pharaoh had told them in private audience. Find what threatens my people and determine if it connects to ancient prophecies. The first day passed uneventfully, following well-traveled routes between farming communities along the Nile's fertile edge. By evening, however, they left civilization behind, camping where desert met farmland. Amenhotep unscrewed his water flask, carefully measuring a portion into his palm for Khensou. Water would become their most precious resource as they traveled deeper into the desert. Nervous? Asked Nakmin, the elderly priest who had insisted on joining despite his age. Should I be? Amenhotep replied, watching the setting sun paint the desert crimson. Most who enter the deep desert seeking darkness do not return unchanged. Nakmin's roomy eyes reflected the campfire. I was your age when I made my first such journey. What we found, he shuddered. Some threats are best left buried. 3 more days of travel brought them to the first oasis, a cluster of date palms surrounding a spring with a small village of mud brick houses. They found it eerily deserted, cooking fires still warm. Possessions abandoned mid-use. Recent, observed the lead scout, examining impressions in the sand. Within hours, Khensou moved methodically through the village, nose working, those amber eyes seeing more than mere physical traces. Amenhotep followed, his awakened senses perceiving disturbances in the invisible threads that connected all things. Near the village center, these threads appeared frayed, as if something had torn the fabric of reality itself. They fled west, Amenhotep reported. All of them, not in panic, but compelled. Compelled how? Meritatan demanded. Amenhotep struggled to articulate what his senses perceived, like sleepwalkers, moving with purpose, but not their own. They followed the villagers' trail as the day waned, finally spotting distant figures shuffling across the sand. Khensou growled low in his throat, a sound Amenhotep had learned, signaled the presence of spiritual corruption. Approach with caution, Meritatan ordered the scouts. Before they could advance, riders appeared on the horizon, desert bandits on swift camels, weapons raised. Unlike the villagers, these men moved with predatory intent. Protect the priests, shouted the lead scout, as arrows whistled through the air. Chaos erupted. Guards formed defensive positions while priests sought shelter behind rocks. Amenhotep instinctively reached for Khensou, finding the massive dog already tensed for action. Sabekka, Amenhotep commanded, using one of the sacred words he'd been taught. Khensou responded instantly, becoming a blur of midnight fur and flashing teeth. The guardian attacked, not with random savagery but with precision, targeting the bandits' mounts rather than the men themselves. Camels panicked, throwing their riders, creating confusion that allowed the royal guards to gain advantage. The skirmish ended quickly. Several bandits lay wounded. Others fled into the desert. One remained kneeling in surrender, disarmed by the guards. "Why attack an expedition under Pharaoh's banner?" demanded the captain of the guard. The bandit, a weathered man with tribal scars across his cheeks, spat blood onto the sand. Better to die fighting than join the sleepwalkers. His eyes fixed on Khensou with superstitious fear. "You bring a temple guardian, then you know already what awakens. Tell us." Amenhotep stepped forward. The bandit's eyes widened at the sight of Amenhotep's temple garments, paired with the guardian dog. The boundary thins. The Ancient One stirs beneath the forgotten temple. He gestured westward. "We raided for survival, yes, but also to intercept any who might strengthen what awakens there." Before more questions could be asked, the man convulsed suddenly, black foam bubbling from his lips. Within moments, he collapsed, dead without further wound or struggle. Meritant knelt beside the body, examining it without touching. "Corruption of the Ka," he pronounced grimly. His life force was already compromised. They made camp, posting double guards. That night, Amenhotep dreamed of a vast structure, half buried in sand, its entrance guarded by statues unlike any in Egypt's pantheon, twisted figures that seemed to move when not directly observed. He awoke to find Khensou standing alert, eyes fixed westward where the missing villagers had been heading. "You sense it too," Amenhotep whispered, placing a hand on the guardian's massive head. The connection between them had strengthened since the vision ritual. Sometimes thoughts flowed between them without need for words. At dawn, they followed the villagers' trail, eventually cresting a dune to behold an astonishing sight. A temple complex emerging from the sand, like a ship surfacing from water. Ancient beyond reckoning, its architecture belonged to no known Egyptian dynasty. The missing villagers worked tirelessly, removing sand from the structure, their movements mechanical and synchronized. "By all gods," breathed Meritaten, "the Temple of Shadow believed only a myth." "Not myth," corrected Nachman, his voice quavering, "but deliberately erased from history. A place so dangerous the records were destroyed to prevent anyone seeking it." Amenhotep studied the temple with his awakened sight, perceiving dark energy pulsating from within like a diseased heart. Something inside pulls at them, using them to free it. "We've found what Pharaoh sent us to discover," Meritaten decided. "Now we must return with this knowledge before whatever sleeps there fully awakens." As if in response to his words, the ground trembled beneath their feet. From the temple entrance, darkness briefly pulsed outward like black lightning. "Too late," whispered Notman. "It knows we're here." The return to Thebes was swift and grim. They brought detailed drawings of the forbidden temple, hieroglyphs unlike any in current use, and most importantly, testimony of what they had witnessed. The enthralled villagers, the dying bandit, the pulsing darkness that seemed aware of their presence. Pharaoh received them immediately upon arrival, foregoing formal court procedure for a private audience in his personal chambers. The aging ruler listened intently as Meritaten described their findings, his lined face growing increasingly troubled. "The Temple of Shadow," Pharaoh mused when the report concluded. "My grandfather spoke of it as a cautionary tale. A place built not to worship our gods, but to contain something else entirely, something that now stirs." Amenhotep added, then quickly lowered his eyes, remembering his place. "Sound freely," Pharaoh commanded. "Formality hinders truth, and I need truth above all else." Amenhotep nodded gratefully. "The corruption spreads, Divine One." The villagers' Ka, their life force, was being drawn away, harvested somehow, and the bandit something had already tainted him from within. Pharaoh's gaze shifted to Khenshu, who sat regally beside Amenhotep. "And what does the guardian sense?" Before Amenhotep could interpret, a court attendant entered with refreshments, wine, dates, honeycakes. The man moved with practiced efficiency, setting down a tray and pouring wine into golden cups. "Leave us," Pharaoh instructed. But as the attendant bowed and turned to go, Khenshu suddenly lunged forward, knocking a cup from Pharaoh's hand, just as he raised it to his lips. Wine splashed across priceless rugs. Guards rushed forward, spears leveled at the massive dog. Amenhotep threw himself protectively beside Khenshu. "Hold!" Pharaoh commanded the guards. His eyes, sharp, despite his age, focused on the spilled wine, which sizzled strangely where it touched the floor coverings. "Interesting." The attendant bolted for the door, but was quickly restrained by guards. "The cup was poisoned," Amenhotep explained, heart pounding. Khenshu sensed the corruption. Pharaoh studied the captive attendant with dangerous calm. "Who instructed you to poison your king?" The man's face remained blank, his eyes unfocused, the same empty expression Amenhotep had seen on the desert villagers. "He is enthralled," Meritaten observed. "His car is compromised. Search him," Pharaoh ordered. The guards found nothing incriminating, but when Amenhotep approached with his awakened sight, he perceived dark energy clinging to a simple amulet hidden beneath the man's garments. "This connects him to whatever corrupts him," Amenhotep said, carefully removing the amulet without touching it directly. The object pulsed with malevolent energy. "How many more walk my palace with such trinkets?" Pharaoh wondered aloud. "How deep does this corruption reach?" The failed assassination attempt transformed their mission. Over the following days, Amenhotep and Khenshu were tasked with examining the palace staff, seeking signs of corruption. They found 7 more individuals carrying similar amulets, all in strategic positions within the royal household. Each night, Amenhotep reported directly to Pharaoh, bypassing normal court hierarchy. This special access bred resentment among court officials, particularly Senenmut, the royal vizier, who made his displeasure evident. A former slave granted private audience, while high officials wait days for mere moments of Pharaoh's time. Senenmut remarked acidly when they passed in a palace corridor. One might question where Egypt's true power now resides. I serve only as Pharaoh commands, Amenhotep replied carefully. As do we all, the vizier smiled thinly. Yet some serve from ambition rather than duty. The implication hung in the air between them. Amenhotep could sense the vizier's aura free from corruption, but burning with jealousy and suspicion. On the 10th night of their stay, Amenhotep was summoned to a different meeting. In a secluded garden, he found not only Pharaoh but also his son Prince Thutmose, and a dozen high officials Amenhotep recognized as Pharaoh's most trusted advisor. What I share tonight must remain among us. Pharaoh began without preamble. Egypt faces an enemy unlike any in living memory, one that corrupts from within rather than attacking our borders. The officials listened solemnly as Pharaoh recounted the desert discoveries and the assassination attempt. The amulets have been traced, the head of royal security reported. They originate from a temple in the eastern delta dedicated to foreign gods. A cult has taken root there, venerating ancient powers that predate our dynasty. These cultists appear ordinary, added Prince Thutmose, until they receive commands from their hidden masters. Then they act without hesitation or fear of consequence, like the villagers at the Temple of Shadow, Amenhotep observed. Pharaoh nodded grimly. All evidence suggests coordination between the desert temple and this delta cult. They seek to destabilize Egypt from within, while awakening whatever sleeps beneath the sand. Why reveal this to me? Amenhotep asked, acutely aware of his unusual position in this gathering of Egypt's elite. Because tomorrow I send you on a more dangerous mission, Pharaoh replied, one that requires both temple authority and the guardian's power. His aged eyes held Amenhotep's steadily. You must infiltrate the Delta cult and sever its connection to the desert temple. Me? Amenhotep's shock was evident. I lack the training, the knowledge of court intrigue. Precisely why you are ideal, Prince Thutmose interjected. The cultists watch our known agent, he connected to the temple yet not of it, serving the court yet not belonging to it. You move between worlds as the prophecy foretold. Before Amenhotep could respond, a messenger arrived breathlessly. Divine One, forgive the interruption. Vizier Senenmut requests immediate audience. He claims to have discovered a plot against the royal house. Pharaoh's expression hardened. The timing suggests he knows of our meeting. To Amenhotep he added quietly, trust no one beyond this circle. The corruption reaches higher than we yet understand. The royal barge cut through morning mist as it navigated the labyrinthine waterways of the delta. Amenhotep stood at the prow, watching waterbirds scatter before their approach. Beside him, Kensi remained vigilant, those amber eyes scanning the reed banks as if expecting danger from every shadow. They traveled under elaborate pretense. Officially, Amenhotep represented the Temple of Anubis, sent to establish diplomatic relations with the foreign temple at Pharaoh's command. In truth, he sought evidence connecting the Delta cult to the desert temple and the attempted regicide. The meeting with Vizier Senenmut had yielded disturbing revelations. The vizier had indeed discovered a conspiracy, but one carefully crafted to implicate Prince Thutmose while concealing the true culprits. The evidence was too perfect, Pharaoh had explained afterward. Too convenient. When power shifts in Egypt, it does so through subtle currents, not obvious trails. Now Amenhotep carried 2 critical documents hidden within his ceremonial staff, a map of known cult locations and a coded message believed to reveal the cult's immediate plans. Both had been discovered in a raid on a suspected cultist's home, but neither priests nor court scribes could fully decipher their meaning. The settlement appears ahead. Guardian priest, announced the barge captain, using the title hastily created to explain Amenhotep's unusual status. Perbastit emerged from the mist, a prosperous trading settlement where Egyptian and foreign influences blended. Merchants from Canaan, Keftiu and lands beyond the Great Green Sea established enclaves here, bringing foreign gods whose worship Pharaoh tolerated with careful restrictions. Their arrival drew immediate attention. Word of a temple guardian traveling with its human companion had preceded them, attracting crowds to the docks. Amenhotep felt the weight of countless eyes as they disembarked. An official welcoming party awaited local administrators and priests wearing the distinctive blue-dyed robes of the Delta region. At their center stood a tall figure whose features marked him as foreign-born, angular face, pale eyes, and a carefully trimmed beard, unlike Egyptian style. "I am Reshep Ka," the man introduced himself with a formal bow. "High priest of the Temple of Reshep, Lord of Plague and Warfare. We are honored by this unprecedented visit." Amenhotep returned the bow precisely as instructed by court protocol masters. "The Temple of Anubis extends greetings to our brothers in Perbastit. Pharaoh himself has expressed interest in the growing influence of your temple." "Has he indeed?" A thin smile crossed Reshep Ka's face. "Then we have much to discuss. My temple has prepared accommodations befitting your station." As they proceeded through the settlement, Amenhotep catalogued details with his awakened senses. Unlike Thebes, where spiritual energy flowed in orderly patterns maintained by state temples, Perbastit's invisible landscape appeared chaotic. Foreign gods' influences clashed and mingled with native Egyptian powers, creating spiritual turbulence that made precise readings difficult. The Temple of Reshep stood apart from the settlement's center, a structure of dark stone built in foreign style, with narrow windows and sharp angles, unlike the harmonious proportions of Egyptian sacred architecture. Guards at its entrance wore amulets similar to those found on the corrupted palace servants. "Your guardian is welcome within our sacred spaces," Reshep Ka assured them, noting Amenhotep's hesitation at the entrance. "We honor all divine messengers." Inside, the temple's atmosphere pressed against Amenhotep's senses like a physical weight. Incense, unlike any used in Egyptian rituals, permeated the air. Wall carvings depicted the foreign god Reshep, a warrior deity with upraised mace, smiting enemies and spreading disease among those who opposed him. "You have traveled far from familiar territory," Reshep Ka observed, as they reached the inner sanctum. "Both geographically and spiritually. Knowledge serves Pharaoh and the gods," Amenhotep replied carefully. "Even knowledge of unfamiliar paths." Indeed, the foreign priest's pale eyes studied him with unsettling intensity. "And what knowledge does Pharaoh specifically seek from our humble temple?" Before Amenhotep could formulate a diplomatic response, Khonsu suddenly stiffened, hackles rising along his massive back. A low growl emanated from the guardian's throat. The specific tone Amenhotep had learned signaled the presence of spiritual corruption. Reshep Ka's expression hardened momentarily, before smoothing into a practiced smile. "Your guardian senses the presence of our god. Reshep's essence manifests strongly in this chamber." But Amenhotep's awakened sight revealed the truth. Behind the altar, barely perceptible to normal vision, a shadowy portal shimmered, identical to the disturbance they had witnessed at the desert temple. Tendrils of dark energy pulsed from it, connecting to amulets worn by temple priests. Quite impressive, Amenhotep managed, disguising his alarm. Few Egyptian temples achieve such direct connection to their deity. "We have special methods." Reshep Ka gestured toward side chambers. "Come, rest from your journey before tonight's welcoming ceremony." In their assigned quarters, Amenhotep knelt beside Khonsu, speaking in the barest whisper. "The portal connects to the desert temple. They channel the same corruption." Khonsu's amber eyes held grim confirmation. That night, feigning sleep, Amenhotep used his awakened sight to perceive beyond physical barriers. Throughout the temple, priests gathered in the inner sanctum, chanting in an unfamiliar language. The portal behind the altar widened with each syllable, its darkness spilling outward. At the chant's crescendo, a figure stepped through, not physically present, but projected across vast distance. Though shadowy and indistinct, its silhouette matched the corrupting presence Amenhotep had glimpsed in his vision quest. The figure spoke words that seemed to burn the air. Reshep-Ka prostrated himself before responding. "All proceeds as planned, Master. The Western awakening continues. The palace infiltration deepens, and now, as you predicted, they have sent the Guardian and his companion directly into our hands." The shadowy figure turned, its featureless face seeming to stare directly at Amenhotep despite walls separating them. It smiled, the same terrible smile from his vision, and spoke a single word that seared itself into Amenhotep's mind. "Good." Dawn found Amenhotep awake, having not dared sleep after witnessing the midnight ritual. Escape now seemed imperative, but the temple grounds swarmed with guards whose auras revealed the same corruption that tainted the palace servants. Worse, Reshep-Ka had assigned attendants who rarely left their vicinity, ostensibly to provide hospitality, actually to monitor their every movement. "We attend morning rituals shortly," informed a young acolyte from the doorway. "High Priest Reshep-Ka requests your presence to observe our devotions." "We are honored," Amenhotep replied, buying time. "Allow us brief preparations." When alone again, he knelt beside Kensu, fingers buried in the Guardian's thick fur. Their connection had deepened to where complex thoughts could sometimes pass between them, without words. "They suspect us," Amenhotep whispered, "but don't yet know what we've discovered. We must appear cooperative while finding a way to warn Pharaoh." Kensu's amber eyes conveyed understanding. The massive dog moved to the window, looking toward the settlement beyond the temple walls. Amenhotep followed his gaze, noting the busy market street that ran alongside the temple complex. "Yes," he agreed. "Among crowds we might slip away." The morning ritual proved illuminating despite its dangers. Dozens of local worshippers gathered in the temple's outer courtyard, many wearing small amulets, similar to those found on the corrupted palace servant. Most seemed ordinary citizens, merchants, craftsmen, fishermen, yet their devotions included disturbing elements: blood sacrifices, self-inflicted cuts, chants that made the air shimmer with dark energy. "Our God requires dedication demonstrated through sacrifice," Reshep-Ka explained, watching Amenhotep closely. "The pain of devotees feeds his strength." "Fascinating," Amenhotep replied neutrally. "Different from Egyptian practice, yet clearly effective in its way. Your guardian seemed unsettled by our methods." The high priest observed as Kansu stood rigidly, eyes fixed on the altar where blood pooled in carved channels. "He senses powerful energies unfamiliar to him," Amenhotep deflected. "As do I. Your connection to your deity manifests strongly." Reshep-Ka seemed pleased with this assessment. "Tonight's ceremony will demonstrate even greater connection. The stars align for a rare convergence, one that will strengthen the bridges between realms." "Bridges to where precisely?" Amenhotep ventured. The high priest's smile tightened. "To realms where older gods than Egypt's pantheon dwell. Entities that ruled before the first pharaoh drew breath." Following the morning ritual, Reshep-Ka proposed a tour of Perbestet, an opportunity Amenhotep eagerly accepted despite suspecting its true purpose was further assessment of their loyalty. The busy market streets provided exactly the cover they needed. Merchants hawked goods from across the known world. Foreign sailors caroused despite the early hour. Crowds pressed around popular stalls, selling exotic foods and trinkets. Amenhotep moved purposefully, as if deeply interested in the market's offerings, gradually increasing distance between themselves and their escorts. Kensu stayed close, his imposing presence causing pedestrians to make way. The eastern gate leads to the river docks. Amenhotep murmured, having memorized the settlement layout from maps studied before their mission. If we reach a boat, we might. Guardian priest, called a temple guard, pushing through the crowd toward them. High priest Reshep-Ka requests your immediate return. Important preparations for tonight's ceremony require your participation. Opportunity vanished. Surrounded by temple guards, they returned to find Reshep-Ka in the inner sanctum, directing preparations for the evening ritual. Additional braziers were being positioned. Strange symbols were being painted on the floor in what appeared to be dried blood. Our guardian priest, Reshep-Ka, greeted them with false warmth. I feared you had become lost in the market's chaos. The settlement's vibrancy proved distracting. Amenhotep replied smoothly. What preparations do you speak of? Tonight you will witness the true purpose of our work, Reshep-Ka explained, gesturing toward the shimmering portal behind the altar. The convergence allows full manifestation rather than mere projection. Our master will physically enter our realm for the first time in millennia. The implications chilled Amenhotep's blood. Whatever entity controlled both the desert temple and this cult would gain physical form tonight. A momentous occasion, he managed. Indeed, one requiring certain precautions. Reshep-Ka snapped his fingers, and guards moved to block all exits, including ensuring our guests' complete cooperation. The pretense had ended. Amenhotep stood straighter, dropping the diplomatic facade. You knew who we were from the beginning. Of course. Your arrival was prophesied, the slave turned priest and his guardian. The final pieces needed to complete the awakening. Reshep-Ka's pale eyes gleamed with fanatic light. You will participate in tonight's ritual, not as observer, but as sacrifice. Kensu growled, moving protectively closer to Amenhotep. Your guardian cannot save you, Reshep-Ka said. The temple itself is warded against such creatures. His strength diminishes with each hour spent within these walls. Amenhotep realized with alarm that Kensu did indeed seem less vibrant, the golden threads connecting them in the spiritual realm growing thinner. Until tonight, reflect on the honor bestowed upon you, Reshep-Ka continued. Few can claim their death served to usher in a new age for the world. Escorted back to their quarters, now clearly prisoners, Amenhotep found the windows barred and door guarded. As sun climbed toward noon, he sat in forced meditation, conserving strength while frantically considering options for escape. They want us alive until tonight, he whispered to Kensu, who lay beside him, amber eyes alert, despite visible weakening. Which means we have until sunset to find a way out and warn Egypt of what comes. Midday heat pressed against the barred windows as Amenhotep paced their prison. 3 hours remained before the ritual preparations would begin. Kensu lay conserving strength, his normally vibrant aura visibly dimmed by the temple's corrupting influence. The ceremonial dagger, Amenhotep whispered, examining the jackal-headed blade he'd managed to keep concealed in his robes. Not for drawing blood, Meritatan said, but for severing connections between worlds. The realization struck suddenly. Perhaps the dagger could disrupt the portal behind the altar. But reaching it meant escaping confinement, evading guards, and somehow interrupting a ceremony led by dozens of fanatics. A soft scratching at the door interrupted his thoughts. Kensu raised his head, ears forward but without his usual alert growl. Whoever approached didn't register as an immediate threat. The door opened slightly. An elderly temple servant entered carrying food and water, his hands trembling, eyes darting nervously to the guardian dog. You bring no corruption, Amenhotep observed, sensing the man's clean aura. You don't wear their amulets. The old man startled at being so directly addressed. I serve the temple because I must. My family, he trailed off, setting down the tray. But what they plan tonight, it is abomination. Even those who haven't taken the master's mark can feel the wrongness. Help us, Amenhotep urged. Egypt itself is threatened. The servant hesitated, then whispered hurriedly, The temple guards change rotation at the hour of shadow. The eastern passage leads to storerooms with an exit to the river. But the guardian, he gestured tearfully at Kensu. The wards weaken him inside these walls. After the servant departed, Amenhotep knelt beside Kensu. Can you feign greater weakness than you feel? Make them underestimate you. The massive dog's amber eyes conveyed understanding. When guards came to escort them to the ritual chamber as sunset approached, Kensu moved with exaggerated sluggishness, head lowered, steps uncertain. Your beast fades, Reshef Kar observed with satisfaction as they entered the inner sanctum. Soon his connection to this realm will be too weak to matter. The chamber had transformed since morning. Blood symbols covered every surface. Dozens of cultists lined the walls, chanting in that strange language that made reality itself seem to waver. Behind the altar, the portal had grown, darkness spilling from it like liquid shadow. Secure the sacrifice, Reshef Kar commanded. Guards forced Amenhotep to his knees before the altar. Kensu was similarly restrained with heavy chains, appearing too weakened to resist. The ceremonial knife remained hidden in Amenhotep's sleeve, undetected in the search. As preparations continued, Amenhotep focused his awakened sight on the portal, studying its structure in the spiritual realm. Golden threads of normal reality strained against the intrusion of something that registered as absolute wrongness. The portal functioned by corrupting these threads, twisting them to create an opening between worlds. The moment approaches, Reshef Kar intoned as darkness fell outside. The stars align. The master comes. The chanting intensified. The portal pulsed, expanding with each syllable. Through it, Amenhotep glimpsed a realm of twisted landscapes and impossible geometries that hurt the mind to perceive. A form began to coalesce in the portal's center, the shadowy figure from his visions, gaining substance with each passing moment. Now, Amenhotep shouted to Kensu. The guardian dog exploded into action, his apparent weakness revealed as deception. With one powerful surge, he snapped the chains binding him and lunged toward the nearest guards. Chaos erupted. Cultists scattered in panic. Guards rushed forward, only to be met by 80 pounds of focused fury. Amenhotep seized his moment, breaking free from his distracted captors. "Stop them!" Reshef Kar screamed. "The ritual cannot be interrupted." Amenhotep fought his way toward the altar, the ceremonial dagger now drawn. His awakened sight guided him, showing exactly where the golden threads of reality had been corrupted. "You cannot stop what comes," Reshef Kar snarled, blocking his path, a ritual blade in his own hand. The old powers returned to reclaim what was always theirs. Their blades met in a clash that resonated beyond physical sound. Amenhotep, once a slave who had never raised a weapon in violence, now moved with the fluid grace taught by temple training, augmented by instincts awakened through his connection with Kensu. Blood streaked the floor as their struggle continued, making footing treacherous. Behind them the portal continued expanding. The shadowy figure, now halfway emerged into the physical world. With desperate strength, Amenhotep finally broke through Reshef Kar's guard, slashing the high priest across the chest. The man fell, clutching his wound, but laughed maniacally. "Too late," he gasped. "The master comes. Egypt falls tonight." Amenhotep turned to the portal. Indeed, the entity was nearly manifest, its form solidifying with each heartbeat. But the ceremonial dagger in his hand hummed with power as he raised it toward the corrupted threads, his awakened sight revealed. "Sever the connections," he whispered, remembering Meritaten's teaching. "Cut what does not belong." The dagger plunged into seemingly empty air, but connected with the twisted golden threads that maintained the portal. As blade met corrupted energy, blinding light erupted. The entity screeched in rage, a sound that transcended normal hearing to pierce directly into the mind. Amenhotep maintained his grip on the dagger, despite searing pain that threatened to overwhelm his consciousness. With one final effort, he twisted the blade, feeling spiritual threads snap like physical cords. The portal collapsed with explosive force, hurling everyone in the chamber backward. The shadowy entity, nearly corporeal, was violently pulled back into its own realm, its furious howl fading into impossible distance. Silence fell. Smoke drifted through the chamber. Cultists lay stunned or fled in terror. Rishepkar stared in disbelief at the empty space where the portal had been. Impossible, the high priest whispered. The convergence was perfect. Your master remains trapped where it belongs, Amenhotep said, struggling to his feet. And Egypt remains protected. Khonsu limped to his side, bloodied but triumphant. Together they faced Rishepkar, who suddenly lunged with his ritual dagger in a final desperate attack. The Guardian intercepted him with deadly precision. When Khonsu stepped back, Rishepkar lay still, threat ended permanent. We must reach Pharaoh, Amenhotep said urgently. This was only one front in a larger war. Midday heat pressed against the barred windows as Amenhotep paced their prison. 3 hours remained before the ritual preparations would begin. Khonsu lay conserving strength, his normally vibrant aura visibly dimmed by the temple's corrupting influence. The ceremonial dagger, Amenhotep whispered, examining the jackal-headed blade he'd managed to keep concealed in his robes. Not for drawing blood, Meritetan said, but for severing connections between worlds. The realization struck suddenly. Perhaps the dagger could disrupt the portal behind the altar, but reaching it meant escaping confinement, evading guards, and somehow interrupting a ceremony, led by dozens of fanatics. A soft scratching at the door interrupted his thoughts. Khonsu raised his head, ears forward but without his usual alert growl. Whoever approached didn't register as an immediate threat. The door opened slightly. An elderly temple servant entered, carrying food and water, his hands trembling, eyes darting nervously to the guardian dog. You bring no corruption, Amenhotep observed, sensing the man's clean aura. You don't wear their amulets. The old man startled at being so directly addressed. I serve the temple because I must. My family, he trailed off, setting down the tray. But what they plan tonight, it is abomination. Even those who haven't taken the master's mark can feel the wrongness. Help us, Amenhotep urged. Egypt itself is threatened. The servant hesitated, then whispered hurriedly. The temple guards change rotation at the hour of shadow. The eastern passage leads to storerooms with an exit to the river. But the guardian, he gestured fearfully at Khonsu. The wards weaken him inside these walls. After the servant departed, Amenhotep knelt beside Khonsu. Can you feign greater weakness than you feel? Make them underestimate you. The massive dog's amber eyes conveyed understanding. When guards came to escort them to the ritual chamber as sunset approached, Khonsu moved with exaggerated sluggishness, head lowered, steps uncertain. Your beast fades, Rishepkar observed with satisfaction as they entered the inner sanctum. Soon his connection to this realm will be too weak to matter. The chamber had transformed since morning. Blood symbols covered every surface. Dozens of cultists lined the walls, chanting in that strange language that made reality itself seem to waver. Behind the altar, the portal had grown, darkness spilling from it, like liquid shadow. Secure the sacrifice, Rishepkar commanded. Guards forced Amenhotep to his knees before the altar. Khonsu was similarly restrained with heavy chains, appearing too weakened to resist. The ceremonial knife remained hidden in Amenhotep's sleeve, undetected in the search. As preparations continued, Amenhotep focused his awakened sight on the portal, studying its structure in the spiritual realm. Golden threads of normal reality strained against the intrusion of something that registered as absolute wrongness. The portal functioned by corrupting these threads, twisting them to create an opening between worlds. The moment approaches, Rishepkar intoned as darkness fell outside. The stars align, the master comes. The chanting intensified. The portal pulsed, expanding with each syllable. Through it, Amenhotep glimpsed a realm of twisted landscapes and impossible geometries that hurt the mind to perceive. A form began to coalesce in the portal's center, the shadowy figure from his visions, gaining substance with each passing moment. Now, Amenhotep shouted to Khensou. The guardian dog exploded into action, his apparent weakness revealed as deception. With one powerful surge, he snapped the chains binding him and lunged toward the nearest guards. Chaos erupted. Cultists scattered in panic. Guards rushed forward, only to be met by 80 pounds of focused fury. Amenhotep seized his moment, breaking free from his distracted captors. "Stop them!" Reshepkar screamed. "The ritual cannot be interrupted." Amenhotep fought his way toward the altar, the ceremonial dagger now drawn. His awakened sight guided him, showing exactly where the golden threads of reality had been corrupted. "You cannot stop what comes," Reshepkar snarled, blocking his path, a ritual blade in his own hand. The old powers returned to reclaim what was always theirs. Their blades met in a clash that resonated beyond physical sound. Amenhotep, once a slave who had never raised a weapon in violence, now moved with the fluid grace, taught by temple training, augmented by instincts awakened through his connection with Khensou. Blood streaked the floor as their struggle continued, making footing treacherous. Behind them the portal continued expanding, the shadowy figure, now halfway emerged into the physical world. With desperate strength, Amenhotep finally broke through Reshepkar's guard, slashing the high priest across the chest. The man fell, clutching his wound, but laughed maniacally. "Too late," he gasped. "The master comes. Egypt falls tonight." Amenhotep turned to the portal. Indeed, the entity was nearly manifest, its form solidifying with each heartbeat. But the ceremonial dagger in his hand hummed with power as he raised it toward the corrupted threads his awakened sight revealed. "Sever the connections," he whispered, remembering Meritaten's teaching. "Cut what does not belong." The dagger plunged into seemingly empty air, but connected with the twisted golden threads that maintained the portal. As blade met corrupted energy, blinding light erupted. The entity screeched in rage, a sound that transcended normal hearing to pierce directly into the mind. Amenhotep maintained his grip on the dagger, despite searing pain that threatened to overwhelm his consciousness. With one final effort, he twisted the blade, feeling spiritual threads snap like physical cords. The portal collapsed with explosive force, hurling everyone in the chamber backward. The shadowy entity, nearly corporeal, was violently pulled back into its own realm, its furious howl fading into impossible distance. Silence fell, smoke drifted through the chamber. Cultists lay stunned or fled in terror. Reshepkar stared in disbelief at the empty space where the portal had been. "Impossible," the high priest whispered. "The convergence was perfect. Your master remains trapped where it belongs," Amenhotep said, struggling to his feet. "And Egypt remains protected." Khensou limped to his side, bloodied but triumphant. Together they faced Reshepkar, who suddenly lunged with his ritual dagger in a final desperate attack. The guardian intercepted him with deadly precision. When Khensou stepped back, Reshepkar lay still, threat ended permanently. "We must reach Pharaoh," Amenhotep said urgently. This was only one front in a larger war. Darkness enveloped Amenhotep, then gave way to disorienting light. Pain radiated from every part of his body. He tried to move, but found himself immobilized, wrapped in linen bandages. Panic seized him until a familiar presence brushed against his consciousness, Khensou, nearby and watchful. "He wakes," announced a voice he recognized as Meritaten's. Gentle hands unwound bandages from his face. Light stabbed his eyes, gradually resolving into the concerned faces of Meritaten and Prince Thutmose. Beyond them stretched an ornate ceiling he recognized, the royal healing chambers in Thebes. "How long?" Amenhotep croaked, his throat painfully dry. 7 days, Thutmose answered, offering water. "We feared you lost to us." Memory returned in fragments. The battle, the entity manifesting, the moment his ceremonial dagger had struck darkness. After that, nothing. The entity he managed vanished, Meritatan confirmed. When your dagger struck, light erupted that none could bear to witness. When it faded, the entity had vanished, along with the temple itself. Only a crater of glass remains where it stood. The cultists, those not killed, fled or fell senseless when their master vanished, Thutmose explained. Without the corrupting influence, the enthralled villagers awakened confused but unharmed. Amenhotep struggled to sit up, finally noticing Khensou lying beside his bed. The massive dog appeared uninjured, those amber eyes watching him with quiet satisfaction. "And you, old friend," Amenhotep whispered. "You took the worst of it." In answer, Khensou simply rested his head on Amenhotep's lap, the sacred collar gleaming against his midnight fur. Recovery proceeded slowly. Burns covered much of Amenhotep's body, where the ceremonial armor had absorbed the entity's dark energy. His awakened sight, temporarily blinded by the confrontation, gradually returned. Within a month, he could walk the palace gardens, Khensou always at his side. Pharaoh summoned them when physicians declared Amenhotep sufficiently recovered. The audience took place, not in the formal throne room, but in Pharaoh's private garden, an unprecedented honor that signified a fundamental change in status. "Egypt owes you a debt beyond measure," Pharaoh stated without preamble. "The threat you faced was ancient, one I feared would consume our land as it did in times before written history." Amenhotep bowed, still uncomfortable with such direct address from Egypt's living god. "I served as any loyal subject would, Divine One." No, Pharaoh shook his head. "What you achieved, few in any age could accomplish. The prophecy spoke truly, not priest, but pure of spirit, not noble, but noble of deed." He gestured to a royal scribe, who stepped forward, bearing a papyrus scroll sealed with the royal cartoon. "This document declares your formal manumission," Pharaoh explained, "though in truth you ceased being a slave the moment the guardian chose you." Amenhotep accepted the scroll with trembling hands. 20 years of servitude officially ended. "Further," Pharaoh continued, "you are hereby appointed guardian priest of the Western Gate, with all rights and privileges thereof. A new temple will be constructed, where you and Khensou may continue your sacred duty of maintaining the boundary between worlds." Overwhelmed, Amenhotep could only bow deeper. "I am unworthy, Divine One." "The guardian disagrees," Pharaoh smiled, nodding toward Khensou, who sat with typical dignified patience. "As do I." In the month that followed, Amenhotep divided his time between the Temple of Anubis, where he completed his formal training under Meritatan, and the construction site of his new temple near the western desert's edge. Positioned precisely where the boundary between worlds was thinnest, the new temple would serve as both warning and protection against threats from beyond. On the day of the temple's consecration, dignitaries from across Egypt gathered to witness the ceremony. Amenhotep, now robed in the formal garments of his office, stood before the central altar where Khensou sat in regal attendance. As he performed the opening rituals, Amenhotep's awakened sight perceived the invisible audience attending alongside the physical one, ancestral guardian companions witnessing this renewal of ancient tradition. Among them stood the shadowy form of Nachman, the elderly priest who had died peacefully in his sleep during Amenhotep's recovery, now continuing his service from beyond. When the ceremony concluded, most attendees departed for the celebratory feast. Amenhotep remained in the sanctuary with Khensou, savoring a moment of quiet reflection. From slave to temple guardian, he mused, stroking the massive dog's head. "A journey I could never have imagined when I spent my savings on a mysterious hound at auction." Khensou's amber eyes held the wisdom of generations, the sacred connection to realms beyond mortal understanding. Through their bond, Amenhotep sensed not just satisfaction, but rightness, the completion of a pattern set in motion lifetimes ago. As sunset painted the desert gold, they stood together at the temple entrance, guardian and companion reunited across time. Before them stretched the western horizon, where Ra journeyed each night through Anubis's domain. Behind them lay Egypt, safe once more from ancient darkness. We have work yet to do, my friend. Amenhotep said softly, the boundary always needs its guardians. Kensu's answering rumble conveyed complete agreement. Together they watched the sun's descent, sentinels at the threshold between worlds, destiny fulfilled yet ever continuing.